You don't always know, do you? You don't always know what's really going on in the lives of the people around you. Sometimes even the people in your own home. There are people in the world who outwardly seem so upstanding and holy. They may even be leaders in the church, but they have dark secrets that they try to keep hidden. It may be a wife who's been having an affair with a coworker for years, but so far, she's been able to get away with it without being detected. It may be a husband who's been cheating on his taxes. He thinks, who will it really hurt? Why shouldn't I? Everyone does it, but of course, he does everything in his power to make sure no one finds out. Over time, our failure to live honestly, uprightly, with integrity will begin to erode the moral foundations of our lives. We can even reach the point of having difficulty distinguishing right from wrong. More and more people are coming to believe that morality is subjective, that everything's relative. Increasingly, we live in a society in which anything goes. According to research done by Lifeway, 1 in 10 people believe that having an extramarital affair is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It was found that having more than one spouse at the same time is okay. As far as 19% of Americans are concerned, 1 in 5 people said polygamy is morally acceptable, they believe. Do you know what percentage of people it was found believe pornography is morally acceptable? 43%, approaching 1 out of every 2 persons. Now, people hold a variety of opinions about multiple issues. People have personal preferences. Respecting differences in people's beliefs can be a virtue to be valued. There are times when differences among people are matters of no real moral consequence, and simply being tolerant of one another's differences, it's appropriate. None of us has it all figured out. Every one of us at times makes choices that someone else doesn't prefer. But there are times when we give in to selfishness, when we give in to sin, when we do things that miss the mark of God's will for our lives, that dishonor God and bring hurt to us and to others, whether we are willing to admit that or not. So, what's to be done then? We are to love one another as persons, even when we fail to live perfectly God's way. Ephesians 4:2 says, always be humble and gentle, patiently put up with each other, and love each other. Now, having patience with one another's mistakes is to act like Jesus. He cared for people even when they were far away from God. He did not look down his nose at sinners. He loved and accepted them as people. He placed a high value on them as persons. But at the same time, he held them accountable for their actions. He could approve of them as people and offer love and care for them as individuals without approving of or tolerating their behaviors if they were doing wrong. A lot of folks get confused about this. They think that if you care for people as persons, you have to accept the wrong or hurtful things they do. But that's not right. Jesus showed it's important to love the sinner while not tolerating the sin. We all should feel a sense of godly conviction whenever we do anything that's outside God's will. We should experience a sense of remorse when we disobey God's truth. And this is where a problem arises for a lot of folks. They don't believe that there is a moral standard that God has established to apply to all people at all times. Polls conducted by the Barna Research Group have found that 72% of Americans believe there is no such thing as absolute truth. That's almost 3 out of every 4 people. They believe that no one can tell them what to believe or how to act. They have the attitude, No one's going to tell me what I should or shouldn't do. I know better than anyone else. They're like the guy who comes up on a car accident. He jumps out of his car and runs over to where a man is lying injured on the ground. There's a woman leaning over the man trying to help him. But the guy pushes her aside and shouts, "Out of the way! I've got first aid training." The woman says, "Well, whenever you reach the end of your first aid training and you need to call a doctor, I'll be right over here." We don't know everything, but God does. That's why we're to live in accordance with godly principles, in accordance with God's timeless truth, in accordance with what God says is right and wrong. But if you don't believe in God, who's to say what's right and what's wrong? If you don't accept that there is a God, it seems reasonable to expect that every culture and every person should determine what's moral and immoral in their own eyes, even if these things may be contradictory and in conflict. What if one group of people thinks one thing is right and another group of people thinks the exact opposite is right? How do you decide between them? Does the majority just rule? Well, just because a majority of people don't accept something as true doesn't make it any less true. Think about this. Suppose we were to take a vote on the law of gravity, and a majority of us decided that we don't believe it's true. Would it then be wise for you to jump off a building because a majority of people believed it would not harm you? Would you say to a pharmacist who was preparing a prescription for you, "Oh, just mix a little of this and a little of that together because I'm part of the majority who decided the laws of chemistry no longer apply and nothing you can do is going to hurt me"? Would you say to an airplane pilot, "Pick a runway, any runway. I'm part of the majority who decided it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter that there are planes sitting on the runway"? Truth isn't something we get to tailor according to our own preferences. A cheating husband may say to his wife, "Well, I've told you some version of the truth," but the wife can rightly declare, "The truth doesn't have versions." If you're seeking to be a follower of Christ, it's so important that you live according to God's truth because it is unchanging, it is eternal. It's vital that you resolve in your heart that you're going to honor God with your convictions. This means deciding ahead of time that you're going to act in godly ways no matter what situation you find yourself in. You go to a party and people start getting high. They offer you illegal drugs, but since you've already decided against that kind of behavior in your heart, you simply say, "No thanks, I don't do that." I know a group of young guys, when they were in college, they decided they were going to live God's way, even if their classmates thought they were weird. Friday night was party night at their university. Everybody knew that. So they decided they'd party in a way that honored God. Every Friday night, instead of getting drunk and drugging and hooking up, they'd bring in pizza, Chinese food, and enormous amounts of Mountain Dew, and they'd laugh and have fun playing video games and cards into the wee hours of the morning. As followers of Christ, even as college students, they bought into the Bible's teaching. Keep your eyes open. Hold tight to your convictions. Give it all you've got. Be resolute and love without stopping. In their real lives, in the real world, they were committed to live in ways that did not dishonor God. Now, it's important to grasp that our convictions are to be based in God's truth, not our feelings. To stand firm in our faith, we need to not let our emotions rule our lives. We need to let Christ rule them. If we are followers of Jesus, How we act and speak should be guided by the God who is alive and active within us. Many people believe that decisions should be based on the idea, if it feels good, do it. But that's not right. Christianity says everything we do should be based on God's truth. How do you know what the truth is? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If we live like Jesus, we'll be on the right path that ultimately will lead us to the joyful kind of life we're really seeking, even if we lose sight of that sometimes. Now, I want to be upfront with you and say that when you stand up for God's way, don't be surprised when the heat gets turned up on you to conform to the way of the world. When you start trying to live in ways that are consistent with Christian convictions, some of the people in your life are likely going to try and pressure you to return to your old ways. They will want you to act in the way you used to. That way, they don't have to be confronted with the need to change in their own lives. There's a story in the Old Testament about 3 guys named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were trying to live for God, but pressure was put on them to buy into the cultural idea that here's a God, there's a God, everywhere is a God. So why not worship them all? They were told they'd be thrown into a fiery furnace if they did not bow down and worship these false gods. What did they do? They refused to conform to the way of the world. They said to the king, who was enraged with them and who was ready to have them killed, the God we worship can save us from you and your flaming furnace. But even if he doesn't, we still won't worship your gods and the gold statue you have set up. They decided to trust the one true God, whatever might happen. So they were tied up and tossed into a fire that was so hot that it killed those who threw them in. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't harmed at all. God protected them because they had remained faithful even in the face of death. Now I want you to notice something. These 3 men respectfully stood their ground in being obedient to God. And they did so in a way that was a positive witness to God without being obnoxious and insufferable. There are some persons today who have become self-appointed, so-called protectors of God's truth. And they act in ways that are an embarrassment to God. They get red in the face and scream at people. They shout hatefully at people. The way they act is far from the love and truth they're supposed to be presenting. When you are seeking to live out your convictions with people that may believe differently than you, don't be mean-spirited or condemning, but respectful when standing up for truth. Implement in your life the idea that God wants us to grow up, to know the whole truth and tell it in love. You shouldn't give in to being led astray and doing wrong. But you also shouldn't act in self-righteous, holier than thy ways that will turn people away from God. Followers of Christ aren't to bash people who haven't yet found God's truth. We're to love them. We're to gently and with a kind and caring spirit point them to Jesus. I really hope we will all get this, because a lot of people miss it. It is unloving to withhold sharing your Christian convictions and to simply conform to the moral relativism of culture. People may say that you're old-fashioned, out of touch, unenlightened, behind the times if you stand for God's truth. But the reality is, that you're selfish if you withhold the truth that can help others. Suppose, for example, you're with a group of hikers who gets lost in the woods at dusk. It's starting to snow. The road to safety is north, but there's a huge disagreement about which direction north is. If you've got a compass with you and the survival of others depends on you, should you keep your mouth shut? No way. You should point them in the right direction, and not to do so is just plain wrong. Now, when we point people to God's truth, some people may say that we're being intolerant, arrogant, hateful. I think we're being exactly the opposite. But I would not be truthful with you if I did not say unequivocally that genuine Christian conviction costs. 10 of Jesus' apostles were martyred for their faith, and 11th was exiled. It is estimated that the Roman Empire executed as many as 2 million believers in Jesus for their faith. Christians today are being tortured and killed in North Korea and many other places around the world. Muslims who convert to Christianity in Saudi Arabia face the death penalty. So, why would you or I want to hold fast to Christian convictions if there is such a cost? Because it's worth it. It's only in Jesus that we can find real meaning and purpose for living. It's only in Jesus that we can truly experience life that's abundant and free. It's only in Jesus that we can discover a peace that passes human understanding, particularly when our worlds are turned upside down. My prayer is that all of us will get to the place in our lives where we can honestly say, God, I'm going to live your way. I'm going to trust you to handle things come what may. God, I believe that you will prevail in the end. I want that kind of faith, to follow Jesus and to hold fast to my convictions, even when the way is uncertain and maybe uncomfortable. But if Jesus holds my hand, what do I have to fear? That is enough. More than enough. So my question is, do you want that kind of faith too? I invite you right now to close your eyes and to bow your heads, and I'm going to lead in a prayer of commitment. As we conclude this series called What in the World, I want to offer the opportunity for you, if you've never before genuinely committed your life to Jesus, if you've not embraced the conviction of faith, I ask that you pray along silently with me in this prayer of commitment. O God of love and God of mercy, when I look at my life, there are times I see how superficial and empty it is. And God, I want more. I want to find meaning and purpose. But I'm discovering that it's the selfishness and the sinfulness in me that's getting in the way. So God, right now, as best as I know how, I admit the selfishness and sin in my life. And God, I ask you to forgive me and to remove from my life all regret and guilt and shame, and to give me a new start. And God, there are so many things I don't understand yet about the Bible. But I believe with all of my heart that you sent your son Jesus into the world, that he died on Calvary's cross for my sin, that he was buried in the tomb, and then that he was raised to new life. And because of that, God, you offer me the hope of new life. I put my full faith and trust in this resurrected Jesus. I'm not holding anything back, God. And so, God, I commit myself every day from now on to seek to live in the Jesus way, to live in obedience to your truth, because that's going to give to me the best life possible. It's going to give me a sense of hope and encouragement, and it's going to help with my relationships with you, God, and with other people. And so, God, here I am with all my shortcomings and my failings and my faults. And I'm asking you to create in me a new life as I accept Jesus as the Lord of my life. I pray this in His strength and His power. Amen. Now, if you prayed that prayer of commitment, at Journey, we would love to help you take the next step of faith. So I invite you to go to our website, journeyconnection.com, and there you will find an eConnect card. I'd encourage you to fill that out, complete it, and then we would be able to follow up and be in contact with you to encourage you to move forward on the journey of faith. Thank you so much for worshiping with us today and finding out the most important thing in the world is Jesus. We're so glad that you have worshiped with us today at Journey Church. We hope you found it meaningful. We hope that you experienced something of the presence of God being at work in your life. And if there's some way that we might be of help to you, that we might pray for you, that we might encourage you, I again want to urge you to go to journeyconnection.com, fill out our eConnect card there. It would give us the privilege of helping you to move forward in the journey of faith. You may just have some questions you want to ask. We would be delighted to help you to move forward, however it is God might be leading you. One thing I want to communicate as clearly as possible is no matter how imperfect you are, no matter what mistakes you may have made, you matter to God and you matter to us at Journey Church. Thank you for the privilege of allowing us to minister and serve with you through Journey Church Online. If you consider yourself to be a part of our Journey Church Online community of faith, we want to offer you the privilege and opportunity of giving financially to make this ministry possible. Your generosity makes such a real difference in the lives of youth and children and families and helping people to experience authentic community. We're grateful that you believe in what God is doing, and we want you to be a part of that. Now, we have a number of mission partners, and when you give to Journey, a portion of that goes to support these mission partners. One of our mission partners is the Society of St. Andrew. They do a marvelous job in helping to provide food for hungry people. In fact, people from Journey have volunteered with their ministry before. And throughout a year, they give millions and millions of pounds of food that have been gleaned from fields that otherwise would have gone to waste. And it provides food through food banks for hungry people. We're grateful that we're able to partner with them and make a real difference. And when you give financially, you make a difference in feeding hungry people. Thank you so much for your generosity.
Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, breathe, call these bones to live. Call these lungs to sing.